Hello there and welcome to another episode of the Middle-earth Play-by-Mail fan channel. What I'm wanting to talk about today is what you can do if you've been looking at this channel and thought this seems rather good and rather interesting. I want to sign up for a game. Now this video is particularly for people who have never played Middle-earth Play-by-Mail before, but maybe through my ramblings on the many videos of this channel, you've got interested, maybe wanting to know how to get into it. So I thought I'd put together a video for the occasional person who stumbles across this channel and who is so ensnared. Now, just a disclaimer, I do have to say that I am not paid by Middle-earth Games. This is purely a fan channel, so this is not an advert. I'm not getting paid commission for this or anything like that. I'm just telling you, if you happen to have got caught up in my enthusiasm for Middle-earth Play-by-Mail, what it is you can do in order to sign up. Well, the very simple answer is you go to the Middle-earth Games website, middleearthgames.com. and have a look around there of what's happening. Now, you can go there and you can have a look at which games are nearly full up. Because you're needing to have up to 24 people signing up for each game, there isn't a game due to start every single minute of every single day. You might have to sign up to one and wait for a couple of weeks, but if you go to the Middle-earth Games website, you will see which games are nearly full up. Now, my recommendation for a first game is that you go for a 1650 variant of the game. 1650 meaning that's the year in the third age of Middle-earth that the game takes place. Now, this isn't the period during which most of Tolkien's works were written, basically The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, which were between sort of 2950, 3016-ish, around about then. So why go for 1650, which isn't the pure canon bit of Lord of the Rings that we love so much? Well, personally, that was the way in which the game was originally designed, and it's very well set up. 1650 is a fairly full-on version of the game. The power levels are a little bit higher, economies are a bit bigger. You'll start out with a bigger economy, a bigger army. You've got a bit more leeway to work with. I wouldn't recommend 2950 personally, although some people might prefer that, because my experience of that variant is that economies are a lot smaller, so it takes a little bit longer to get going, and the game itself, it's a little bit harder to manage the economic resources in the first instance. Also, there tend to be more people who play 1650 than 2950, so 1650 game will get going sooner, and 1650 games, it's a lot easier to start by just taking on one nation, which is the best thing to do first time round. With 2950, often with a smaller pool of players signing up for a game, they will often take on 2, maybe even 3 nations each in order to make the game viable. There are some other variants of the game, such as Fourth Age or Champions of Middle-earth or Kinstrife, but these are not recommended for beginners. Best to cut your teeth and learn the rules and how it all ticks over in something like 1650 first. There are also the other variant in which games happen is whether they are what's called gunboat games or full diplomacy games. A gunboat game is one where there is limited to no interaction between the players, so you just have your position, you don't have interaction with the other players on your team. This is not recommended for a beginner, partly because first time round it's useful to have a team around you. People who've played the game before, who can advise you on what's good, what's not so good, help you with your turns when you're putting them together, generally just advise you as you find your feet in the game. Now, if you go to the middleearthgames.com website, I would encourage you to go to the materials section, and there you will find a lot of information which will help you in understanding and learning the game. Go there and download and have a look at the rulebook. But don't panic. You will have a look at the rulebook and think, blimey, this is huge and very complicated. And to an extent that is true. But a lot of what's in the rulebook, it's It's there to help you as you learn and go along within the game. I've been playing for 25 years. There are still parts of the rulebook I will look at to try and clarify how a particular order works, what the factors of success that are built into that order are. So the rulebook certainly is there, and there's a lot of information which you will need, but the information you actually need to get started is much less than the rulebook contains. So you can get going with a smaller lot of knowledge and just a feel for how the game goes. Now, off the materials section on the website, there is also in the right-hand column a section called Help and Advice. Click on that. There is all sorts of information there which is useful. Particularly read the article on getting started, because that's written by the people who run the game, who know the game best, and they have helped oodles and oodles of people get into Middle-earth play-by-mail and start it. So that's really information that you want to go for. What I say here should be taken as my personal opinion and should be read in the light of the Getting Started document, which is probably better and more accurate than my ramblings. Now, when you sign up for a game, when the game is getting close to being run, you will be asked by the moderators which nations you would like to have a go at trying out, would you like to play as. And you can put some nations down in order of preference with some guidance from the mods, particularly if you're a first-time player. However, you may not know which nations you would like to play or would be good to play and which ones wouldn't. So I'd give a little bit of advice here. Now, I'm assuming that you've taken my advice from earlier in this video. You're going for a 1650 version of the game with full team, diplomacy, interaction, the lot. I would recommend playing Free Peoples perhaps more than the Dark Servants, unless you really want to play the bad guys, in which case there are some good Dark Servant nations to go for. But the Free Peoples have bigger economies, bigger armies than the Dark Servants, and as a result they're a little bit more solid and a bit more durable, a bit more forgiving if you make a few mistakes. The Dark Servants, on the other hand, have a much smaller economy, but they do have very powerful characters, so are better in the technical mid to long-term parts of the game when character rules tend to really kick in a bit more. Amongst the Free Peoples, nations which it would be good to have a look at for your first game would include the Dwarves, the Northmen, or the Cardalan. The Dwarves, they are spread out a bit across the map, so on the downside is coordinating armies can be a bit tricky. On the upside, it means that you can't just have your area completely stormed and wiped out because you're spread all over the map. You have good solid armies. In Khazad-dûm, you have a near invulnerable capital, and you're not in the immediate firing line of the Dark Servants, so that gives you a space to get on with things. Your economy is also pretty secure as well. So the Dwarves are a fairly forgiving nation, a good one for beginners to start off with. The Northmen as well, they're over in the far eastern side around sort of Rhûn. They're also up around sort of Esgaroth as well. They're the forebears of the Lake Men of Dale. And the Northmen are also good. They're quite good economically. They have an advantage when they buy and sell goods of a 20% premium on those. They can also name emissaries at a fairly high rank. So if you're wanting to play a bit more of an economic game, the Northmen can be good there. There can be some vulnerability to early attack from Long Rider, but hey, we play this game because it's fun. And you have got people in the nearby neighbourhoods who are such as the Dwarves and Airthrain that you can coordinate with. So you have allies built in. Or then there's Cardalan, another military-based nation predominantly. You will, was Cardalan, be involved in the battle against Angmar right at the start. You will have Arthur Dayne close to you. Arthur Dayne and Cardalan work together very well as nations. So provided the guy playing the other half of the Arthur Dayne Cardalan combo is prepared to be very communicative and work with you, you'll have a good ally alongside you from the start of the game. A couple of other nations that maybe you'd want to consider would be Dayne. I think Cardolan is perhaps a bit easier to start with than Dayne. Dayne is a little bit closer to Angmar. If you've got a very aggressive Witch King player, it tends to be Dayne that will be hit rather than Cardolan. Cardolan also has things such as being able to recruit armies for free. So in terms of being able to generate big armies to defend, if you are having to defend Cardolan, it's a bit easier to do that. Otherwise, if you're wanting to play with the mage game a bit, the Cinder Elves are perhaps one to consider of the two elven nations. The Noldrin Elves really are for much more experienced players. They have some very powerful characters and have very technical specialist roles to play within the game. But the Cinder do have a certain amount of mage power to play within the game, but they're not so heavily focused as the Noldo are. The Cinder also have 3 cities in the Mirkwood, Lothlorien area, which are hidden, so they're relatively protected at the start of the game, and that means you can be recruiting armies, fighting against Dol Guldur. So there is a slightly rounded aspect to the Cinder relative to the much more focused and technical Noldo. Thinking around the Mirkwood sort of area, the Woodman Nation, sometimes some players think that would be a good one to start off with. They can be a little bit harder to play because they can be a little bit vulnerable to military attack at first, but if you can work with your neighbours and see that off, the Woodmen are usually in quite a good position, and the Woodmen can be one of the better agent-based nations amongst the Free Peoples. If you want to go full agent, really Dark Servants are the way to go because they're the shifty, nasty ones. But Woodmen do have some perks which relate to agents. South Gondor is an outside possibility. South Gondor are very strong, but you really need to be a team player. You won't be in the firing line right at the start unless you're very unlucky and the Corsairs are against you and decide to do a full naval invasion. But the South Gondor normally has North Gondor in front, soaking up most of the pain from Mordor, which gives you the chance to develop a bit more. However, with their economy and with their recruitment base, South Gondor have to play a really strong role in giving money to other nations whose economies are more fragile, and in getting troops forward to help other nations, and particularly making good use of navies. So there's an extra aspect of rules in the naval rules you'll have to consider with South Gondor that land-based military nations such as the Dwarves or Cardolan or Arthedain aren't going to have to worry about so much. So South Gondor has a little bit more complexity for it. Only other one to mention of the Free Peoples, North Gondor. I really wouldn't recommend North Gondor as a starting position because, again, it has a very key role. It's a very big position, very difficult to handle. If you really want a big military game to play, go for Arthedain, maybe Cardolan or South Gondor, or the Dwarves if you play them right, very strong military nation. If you do really want to go for the Dark Servants, on the other hand, ones to consider there would be the Long Rider or the Fire King, maybe Quiet Avenger or the Ice King. A lot of the Dark Servant nations are quite precarious and require very skillful play, particularly Witch King and the Dragon Lord. They're very much under pressure and you really need to know what you're doing. If you spend a couple of turns getting a feel for how it's going with those positions, you could get overrun. So they are not recommended, even though I know we all really secretly deep down want to be the Witch King of Angmar. However, some within Mordor itself are a lot more defended and have allies near them, but again they can sometimes have very specific tactical roles to play. The Cloud Lord, for example, being the premier assassin nation in Middle-earth play-by-mail, really needs someone who can understand that aspect of the character game, because if the Cloud Lord isn't playing at their most efficient, it's a real drag on the Dark Servants team as a whole. Blind Sorcerer, again, might be playable, but again, the Blind Sorcerer with all their mages really need to know what they're doing in the artifact game and picking up all the agent and curse and stealth artifacts early on. So, you know, probably best to play them in your second game, but your second game is perhaps jumping on a bit too far. However, within Mordor itself, Fire King is relatively secure, relatively strong. Ice King, again, they're pretty good military nations. Start off with good armies, can get in and, you know, hand it out to either Aerthraim or maybe North Gondor, but also can name agents at rank 40, I believe they can. So Ice King, you know, offers a bit of flexibility in that regard. Long Rider is very good if you are going to start on the Dark Servant side, because you have two virtually untakeable major towns, which makes it very hard to knock you out, and you start with some very good agents, which, as long as you take some advice from your teammates early on, you'll have good fun learning the agent side of the game with Long Rider, as well as being able to get a little bit of military action in early on, because you do start with some good cavalry armies. Quiet Avenger, finally, they're relatively secure deep in the south, depending on how the neutrals are set up in the game that you're in. If you're in a game with pre-aligned neutrals, it's normally that the Corsairs and Rudawa are with the Dark Servants, in which case Quiet Avenger is very secure because you've got a 2-on-1 battle with yourselves and the Corsairs going after Harad. If you've got neutrals who start out genuinely neutral and need to be persuaded to go on your side, Quiet Avenger is still mostly okay as long as you talk to the neutrals who are around you, and if either Harad or the Corsairs look like they're going to declare for the Free Peoples, start talking to the other one and persuade them to declare for the Dark Servants. You'll still have that 2 against 1 you know, sort of situation, but hopefully neutrals won't declare within the first couple of turns, giving you a little bit of scope to, you know, start putting down some roots and developing your emissaries and so forth. The neutral nations that you would start off with, whether they're pre-aligned or not, I seriously wouldn't advise them. I wouldn't say at all to have a true neutral nation where you're not allied to either Free Peoples or Dark Servants at the start, primarily because it means you won't have any allies to talk to give you advice. And if they are pre-aligned, then they're in situations that are really quite tricky. The Duns have a very specific role to play. Rudawa is on the front line, and you're going to have Cardolan and Arthur Dayne rocking up and causing you damage very early on. It will be quite a dispiriting game, I imagine. Harad is split on either side of the Great River Harnan and will get carved up quite quickly by the Corsairs if you're unlucky. And the Corsairs also need to be played very well because they're pretty much the best economy that the Dark Servants will have. And they will need someone who really knows what they're doing to be able to anchor the team in the mid-game. Right, so you decide which nation you're going to have a look at. If you want information on different nations, there is some within the rule books, but I would seriously advise you go to the Middle-earth Wikipedia page, MEPBM.wiki or something like that. I'll put the proper URL at the bottom of the page here right now, so you can see that. Got that? Brilliant. Okay, I should have researched that before I started this. And you can just have a look and get a little bit of a feel for where the nation is. On the Middle-earth Games website, you can download a copy of the map and have a look at that so you can see where everything is. Otherwise, when you sign up for a game, it might be worth, if you ask Middle-earth Games, as it's your first game, if they could link you up with a mentor. A mentor is someone who agrees to come on and be a part of a game, knowing they are taking on the role of helping a new person get into the game. So it's useful to have someone who's a mentor. While most teams will want to encourage and look after you anyway, having someone on your team who is specifically tasked with that is useful, particularly getting through the first 5 or 10 turns where you really will be learning the ropes. And then, having signed up, at some point you will get your first turn files through. You should go onto the Middle-earth game site and download Overseer, sometimes pronounced Joverseer. I've done a video about using Joverseer, so you can have a look at that video if you like. And there's also a lot of information on how to use it and set it up on the Middle-earth game site. Joverseer is a kind of client program which was put together by people playing the game and which has become the standard for looking at your information, compiling your turns and submitting your turn orders through to Middle-earth Games. It's a really useful resource. Do use it. So download Joverseer, set up your game on Joverseer and get your turn files on there, and then you'll be able to see what's going on. You will also very quickly, I would hope, once your game is set up, have some email contact from other teammates. They should be in touch, and it's usual that someone on the team, an experienced player, will set up means for the group to have a place online where they can share their files, where they can have email communication. It's also possible to go onto the Middle-earth Games Discord server and get on there, and there can be team chats on there as well. Communication is key at all times, but particularly in your early game when you're learning. Do share your files with teammates and do download their files as well, because that will give you the most information. You'll be able to see everything that's happening that they are aware of across the whole of Middle-earth, and that'll help you get more into the depth of the game. You probably will have more than enough information to deal with just in your own turn sheet, but particularly if you're playing somewhere like Cardalan, who has to work closely with Arthur Dayne, you will need to, it's good to see what your near allies are working on at the same time. So share your files, download them onto Joverseer. Otherwise, the main thing is use your teammates as a resource. Ask questions. There's no question too stupid. Everyone was a beginner once. Prepare draft orders, prepare them early and share them and say, guys, please critique these, let me know. There are two sides of the game. One is knowing the technical way to put orders together and submit them so that your nation and your characters and your armies will do what you want them to do, and that's a pretty steep learning curve at first, but you will start to get a feel for that, and the core orders which you will issue as 80 to 90% of your order, so buying and selling stuff, characters moving around, armies moving around, recruiting troops, planting camps, those sorts of things. In your first 5 turns, you'll probably do the orders that you will use 80% of the time, so you should get those mechanics of how the game works done, and get a feel for that relatively soon. The other side of the game, which will take a longer time to learn, is the subtlety of knowing why you are or issuing the orders that you do. So again, do keep asking questions of your teammates and saying, what's the strategy? Why are you doing this? Why are we moving to attack this major town and not that major town? Why are we deliberately keeping this army back rather than moving out? Why is this character not moving to their capital to do some nefarious thing? Why is he just going to that little camp over there? All of these things, long-term players will automatically have a feel for. Get them to explain why it is they do the things they do, and that will really help you learn the game and appreciate what is going on. Otherwise, as you go along, there will be places where you can gain more information. I've already mentioned the wiki page. Do have a look at that. That has pulled together all sorts of information from across the years. So as well as all the information that's been sort of condensed together for the particular formats of the game, both 1650 and 2950 in terms of starting positions and the rest, they've also host a lot of the scans of fanzines and fan information and so forth, which has been put together and written over the years. It's all been brought into one place, which is excellent. And I would also say that there is the Middle-earth Play-by-Mail fan channel as well, which has put together a few guides on what you can do in the game and how particular things work. A lot of them which I hope to say would be really useful for starting players. So if you prefer to get your information by having YouTube on in the background, by all means do that as well. Yeah, but anyway, if you've got this far, do a little thumbs up and like what I've done. Maybe subscribe to the channel so you find more information as it comes out. I hope if you have decided to sign up for a game, when you've got your first turn sheet through, just post below which game you've signed up for and which nation you're on. It'll be good to see what people are playing, and hopefully one day maybe we might be on the same team together, and that'd be really good fun. If we are, do say, "Hi Nick, I signed up to a game because I saw your videos." That would warm the cockles of my heart. But that's me about done for now. I won't take up any more of your time. Go off to Middle-earth Games and have a look at what games are coming up. Sign up for one. Do, try it. It's good fun. You'll enjoy it. So, from me, goodbye. Have a good day.